Everyone's been talking about free speech on university campuses. I wrote about it for the first time in 2014 or maybe even 2013, way before everyone else, before cancel culture was a term. It was called Intolerance We Trust. And even then, it was obvious that schools were becoming very illiberal institutions. And now it's all blown up and there's a culture war, and you don't need me to tell you the details at this point. But what I thought was interesting is what started happening last year. Andrew Sullivan and Barry Weiss, Glenn Greenwald, Matt Iglesias, all these center-left people were basically bounced from their own publications because the woke people took over. It was the New York Times, it was Vice, Vox, and these were founders. Glenn Greenwald, he was the liberal guy fighting against the establishment, and then very quickly that leftist order became the media establishment, and he was no longer welcome because they drifted so far left. He was a right winger. Same thing happened to all these people, Barry Weiss. And in July of 2020, I speculated that some of them might have a venture funded and ready to go. I even said maybe they can start Canceled U, a heterodox university that actually teaches all the things woke universities won't. Well, that was June 17th, 2021. And here we are. They launched it. On November 8th, they said, look, we're not putting up with this anymore. So they're creating the University of Austin. And all the names you've probably heard, the ones that I've just named, as well as some people that have been on this podcast. Nadine Strawson, formerly of the ACLU, she's on there. Glenn Lowry, who's also on the show, he's on the board of advisors. So all these people that have been fighting the wokesters are now involved in this university. And a lot of very reputable people, some historians, some academics. Steven Pinker, I think, was involved, and then he quit because he just got cold feet. He used some BS excuse. But, there's a bunch of really smart establishment, media, and academic people involved. And this place is not accredited yet. It's going to take time. The goal of this is a university that teaches traditional liberalism, principles of free speech, free thought. And my reaction to that is a little bit mixed. I'm very pro free speech. I've done tons of episodes on that. And I respect a lot of these people that are involved. I've had some of them on my show. But the reality is we need fewer social studies majors, not more of them. We already have way too many people borrowing money so they can pontificate online. Some of us can do that for free. You don't need to pay someone tens or sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that. You don't need to take out loans to have an opinion on some of the great philosophers or, to study Socrates. You can get the book and join a book club. That's virtually free. What we need doers. We need engineers and builders, scientists, entrepreneurs, skilled tradesmen, doctors, coders, people who actually create things that people can use. That is what we need. Even though they're solving for something that they see as a problem, they're taking a very traditionalist approach to it. Free speech should be a principle. It doesn't have to be a university. You can attract some students based on those principles, and you can even have a successful enterprise, but you will never change the system by playing the same exact game as the system you're theoretically trying to subvert. You're just going to be another player, another university to choose from, even if everything goes well. And critical thinking, which is really what they're talking about, right? Because free speech really means being able to evaluate things independently, say what you want in a way that challenges what others are saying, even though they represent the consensus. That critical thinking should be taught in high school. That should not be in college and should not involve loan officers. There are way better ways to do that. We need completely new education models that are modular, that are way cheaper, that are debt-free, that are performance-based, where we go back to measuring how people do, and outcome-oriented. What did you build? What did you create? they should be experiential because that's how people learn best. They learn best as apprentices. I learned so little in finance when I studied in college, but when I actually started looking at the books of companies I was working for as a consultant, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I get it now. And I was under the tutelage and psychological abuse of a lot of managers who needed me to produce results. And so I had to learn in real work, real life conditions. That is experiential. Whether you're a cobbler, if those are still around, or you're learning how to do manufacturing, or you're learning to do R&D, there are so many things that are best done through experiential learning, especially for males. Like I know males do not do well sitting at desks, and you've seen the statistics. Now women outnumber men. I think it's going to be close to 2-1 very soon. That's the projection in universities. Men are not driven towards this mode of teaching, which is exactly the mode of teaching this new University of Austin is promoting. And it has to be practitioner taught. Like the best people are people who've actually done it, not people who, talk about doing it or went straight into academia. And it has to be untethered from these dinosaur gatekeepers. Even now, these guys are going to be waiting to become accredited so they can join the traditional system and get financial aid and get loans, or their students can get loans and they could issue diplomas, and those diplomas can be used for recruiting. That's a dinosaur system. That's a dead system, and it needs to go away. And it has to be aligned with market demand. What jobs are necessary? There are so many degrees, especially in the social sciences and in liberal arts, that only exist to teach other people to become teachers in that same field. And there aren't enough teaching jobs. So all these people get these worthless degrees that they can't use because they're an English major or an arts major or art history or something completely useless. It's not useless. It's a great hobby, but you shouldn't be paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to get that. We should be supporting and promoting the types of careers or the types of learning that actually is needed, that people want to pay for, that companies are crying out for. That's why they're trying to get all these immigrants from India and from China. They want people who can do the STEM type work, the engineering, the mathematics, the science. And this has to be competitive internationally. We need to measure ourselves against the world. Our high school students on the PISA exam, which measures sciences and reading and all the essentials, math, the number one economy per capita is ranked 34th. Every teacher should be fired. All of them. I don't care. No excuses. It's absurd. And yes, I know there's failures in the home. There's other issues that people have, but 34th, you better not be walking around thinking you're a hero when we're ranked 34th in the world in competitive space. And that's why they're trying to take away standardized testing, because they know they're failing, and they're failing miserably, and they can't be fired. And it's hard to make a case for why you can't be fired when you are so unbelievably fireable because of your performance. And we need to have the same kinds of measures that all these other countries have, so we know what are we producing. And just like I support the same concept in industry, our broadband speeds should be up to par and more economical and more efficient than the ones in South Korea. We need to be playing that same game across the board. And I know there's people like, oh, you could just opt out and you can live this chill life. Why do you want to play the game? The game is being played whether we like it or not. The bills keep showing up. You still need a place to live. You still need a car. You still need food. You still need to survive. And now you need more and more money to do it because of the inflation. We can't live with our heads in the sand. And more of the same from University of Austin, unfortunately, will not solve the problem, even though these are good people, they mean well, but they are trying to create something that already exists and is failing a lot of people. Someone posted, why would you enter a stagnant market? Yes, there's a few elite schools, and then there's a whole bunch of second tier. I think tier is a much more, although tier implies crying, but it's a stagnant industry. You can still stand out. And the example I used is Trader Joe's, the supermarket space, which is extremely low margin. I'm talking about like 1% to 2% margins. It's just a terrible business. Food is constantly going bad. There's constant logistics involved. It's very high maintenance inside the store. You need a lot of labor. The reason Trader Joe's is able to stand out, the reason Walmart is able to stand out, is they picked a lane that makes them unique. So Trader Joe's is an example. They created this bespoke experience where the prices are always fair, the selection is really good, the quality is really good, and you're in and out really quickly. So they attract a different kind of clientele. So even though they're not putting ShopRite out of business, they're able to go into markets and create a niche for themselves. And that's exactly what I think University of Austin can do, but it's not disruptive at all. It is just another competitor in a space that's hopefully going to be differentiated if they're going to succeed. And one of the differentiators, the main differentiator, is this collective branding of all the people involved. These are people with large social media followings and footprints that always do a ton of podcasts. A lot of independent media seeks them out. Ayaan Hirsi Ali, Barry Weiss gets tons of subscribers on her blog and her podcast. So these are people of prominence, and you can't underestimate in this influencer culture this power of branding. So they're creating a collective brand built from the bits and pieces of what these individual contributors have. And hopefully that will attract people, because each of these people have fans, whether they're adults with kids or the kids themselves. They'll go, hey, I'm interested in this. I'm curious about it. And maybe they'll take a class. Maybe they'll start with an online class. And then over time, it legitimizes, because that's how all things start. No company starts out perfect or gigantic. They start out small and they build. And that's what these guys are going to do. It kind of reminds me of what Joe Rogan did. He started a podcast that no one listened to. He was just live streaming and hanging out with his friends. Sometimes 100, 200 people maybe were watching. The technology wasn't even developed yet. But then over time, the audience grew, and all the people that appeared on the show created their own successful podcasts. They're starting to do theaters and perform in these giant spaces because he created this launch pad, and it's an ecosystem where they all appear on each other's shows, they all help each other, and this created a level of popularity not just for Joe, but for all the people involved. And I think the same thing can happen here if they do it right. And there are ways to innovate the business model. And just think about the range. There are people paying $5 a month on Patreon to listen to me. If you haven't yet, patreon.com/McFuture. So that's the very low end, right? I'm not giving you a certification. You're not going to get hired because you listen to the show. You might because of something you learned, but not because you showed the certificate and say, hey, look at my podcast feed. Steve Faktor's on there. Clearly, I'm qualified for this gig. That's not going to happen. But what will happen is you will subscribe to the things that interest you, that educate, that entertain, that give you something additive to your life. And then at the very high end, you've got people that are paying tuition, tens of thousands of dollars a year in the traditional system. Somewhere between paying $5 a month on Patreon, or maybe paying for like a Udemy course online to learn Excel or to learn how to do filmmaking or editing, all the way out to traditional university, there lies some sort of model, and including a minimum viable product. The cheapest, quickest way to launch with as much possible value in a specific area that isn't being addressed by others, and differentiate just on that thing. So here, they've got a good start. They've got these very prominent people, and they've got free speech as a theme. Whether it's enough, I don't know. I think there's probably other things they'll need to do, and have like maybe one killer course that everyone talks about, or get that course tied into a recruitment funnel, so that way people who take that course earn money from having studied it. So I think there's a lot that can be done. In fact, I'd like to work with them. I think there's a way to innovate this business model, move it away from this traditionalist path, even though I think there are things you can take from that path, particularly money, but also drive it towards new frontiers where you have hybrid learning situations, where you have a real recruitment pipeline, and you have, for the first time, probably in 100 years, momentum and interest and curiosity about a university, the oldest thing possible. These things have been around for hundreds of years and haven't really changed much and haven't grown, because scarcity is how they keep prices high and keep that exclusivity. And they've only gotten more exclusive over time. So they take pride in the people that they reject. I think there's a way to turn that system on its head. It's just something I'm thinking about and presents a lot of potential. And here's why. Someone tweeted this. Recent Columbia film alumni had the highest debt compared with earnings among graduates of any university's master's program in the U.S. The university's $11.3 billion endowment ranks it as the nation's 8th wealthiest private school. These schools are raking in insane money. They're investing that money. They're making more money from the invested money. They could probably afford to let a lot of these kids go in for free and still pay all of their costs, but they're not doing that. But the kids themselves are screwed because most of them can't use those degrees, not the Columbia film degree. Good luck with that. I taught myself how to edit. I'm not the greatest editor, but that's not something you need to pay Columbia tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars for. I think these are criminal enterprises. I think if you are charging people that kind of money to go into bullshit professions or non-existent professions, studying things that you know there's no market for, that's fiduciary malpractice. So if you're an investment advisor and you know something is a rotten investment and you recommend that person invest in that, you're committing malpractice because you're a fiduciary and that person is entrusting you with their money. And the same thing here. This is malpractice. And no wonder they're embracing wokeness. Yeah, it hides a criminal enterprise. This is a criminal enterprise. They're breaking their fiduciary duties to these students and charging them for something that a lot of them can't even pay. I saw yesterday, I don't remember where I saw it, that there are people that are getting their college loan repayments deducted from their Social Security checks. They've retired. They're done working, but the school still needs their money. Not needs, wants. It's just insane. And students and families should know better. And if you're rich, fine, burn your money. Who cares? That's amazing. Knock yourself out. But if you're going to be playing innocent, and this is why I'm completely against bailing out these students. We know. All of this stuff has been known for decades. We know which degrees are worthless, which ones are good. We know which schools are worthless and which schools are good. Everything is out there. It's in the open. You're making bad choices, and there are other people who made better choices that now have to pay for you. And on top of that, the people being asked to pay are people without degrees. Only 30% or even less of Americans have college degrees. So you're asking the 70% who earn less statistically and don't have a college degree to subsidize the people who decided to take a worthless degree. They didn't go into medicine or some other high-paying profession. They went into some bullshit art history thing, and now it's going to be forgiven. I think that's a moral hazard we don't want. We need to fix that underlying root cause, which is a rotten, filthy, horrible system that needs to go. And I'm going to do a full episode on that. I did an episode previously on education and the future of education, but I've had a lot more thoughts on it and I'm a lot more worked up. So it's going to be really good. I hope I get to put that out probably, I'm guessing like first quarter of next year, because I'm all backed up. That's it for this episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget, review the show on iTunes, sign up on YouTube, and also support on Patreon if you can. Patreon.com/McFuture. Tell a friend, tell your enemies, tell everybody. I'm Steve Faktor. See you next week on the McFuture. Here are some of the founding trustees of University of Austin. So the guy who's running it is Pano Kanelos, former president of St. John's College. And then you have Niall Ferguson. I think he pronounces it Neil. Historian, Hoover Institution at Stanford University. Very, very prominent historian. Barry Weiss, formerly of the New York Times. You've got Heather Haying, who's an evolutionary biologist and author. You've got Joe Lonsdale, co-founder of Palantir. That's interesting. That's Peter Thiel's company. And the reason he's on the board is Peter Thiel is bankrolling this thing. And then you've got, where are the other people? These are the founding trustees. So board of advisors, Arthur Brooks, Harvard University, Ayaan Hirsi Ali, Hoover Institution, Stanford University Research Fellow, Glenn Lowry, who's been on this show, John Nunez, former president, Concordia College, Jonathan Haidt, who is an NYU sociology professor and author, Nadine Strawson, who also has been on the show. She's on the board of trustees. She's former president of the ACLU. Lex Friedman, who's a scientist, research scientist at MIT, also very popular on YouTube. Rob Henderson, who's a writer and Cambridge scholar. So a lot of people. Sohrab Ahmari, journalist and author, conservative guy, really smart guy. Let's see. Leon Kass, Shalem College, Shalem. Larry Summers, he's from Harvard University. He's the former Treasury Secretary. Very interesting guy, very controversial guy. A lot of love and hate for Larry. He's very opinionated. Yeah, so it's quite a who's who. Andrew Sullivan, who very famous blogger and writer. David Mamet. This is an interesting one. This one's unexpected. David is a director. He directed some of my favorite movies. Spanish Prisoner with Steve Martin. He directed what's the famous Glengarry Glen Ross, which was a phenomenal movie. That was before Alec Baldwin shot anybody. That was a great one. Better times for Alec. Tyler Cowen, he's a libertarian economics professor at George Mason. He's probably the most influential libertarian economist out there. Really, really sharp guy. Deidre McCloskey. She rings a bell. University of Illinois, Chicago. Yeah, I've heard her name. Caitlin Flanagan, who's a writer at The Atlantic. She's also a very smart woman. Written some really interesting pieces lately about kids and education. It's quite a who's who. Hold on, let me see. I think there's another group of people that are involved. It's a very fine line between what they're calling founding trustees, board of advisors, and faculty fellows. And a lot of it probably has to do with exposure to lawsuits. So it's the same thing when you're on the board of directors of a corporation. You have to sign all the stuff that you're liable for any kind of fraud. So that's why there's insurance that they take out, because you're on the hook for anything that happens, or for anything illicit that happens. Some other people, Peter Boghossian. Okay, I guess that's it. But it's a pretty impressive list. It's a pretty impressive list of people, and I wish them success. I hopefully will get involved in some capacity. But again, this is no easy undertaking. This is something that they legitimately have to figure out how to do differently, because they could be the Trader Joe's and just be another really good supermarket chain, and maybe that's good enough. They'll make an impact on whoever goes through that school. But I think there's potential to do more here and to work with the model as well as the content of what they're teaching.